So on the side of the microscope you have the on-system display, which will give you some information that you need to load and unload cassettes. Now first of all, you can see in the top left the vacuum values. You can also find all these values on the microscope itself when you're behind the control panels in the vacuum tab, but it shows you here the vacuum values. It also shows you the nitrogen level here of the autoloader and the column, so you know when it's going to fill. It gives you here the status of the autoloader, so it now says cassette in docker, it means that there is a cassette inside. When there is no cassette inside, it will say no cassette in docker, so it's empty. Then you can here select whether or not you have the turbo pump always on or the turbo pump auto off in default. That option you also have in the autoloader tab. When you go for screening your samples, you will keep the turbo pump always on, and when you start imaging you will switch to default turbo pump off. Then there is the option to leave the cartridge on the CompuStage, and this is very handy to have that already here. Normally I would leave a cross grading on the CompuStage when I change the cassette, and I can then select that option here, so that when I have the cross grading on the stage I don't have to go back to the control panel, but I can decide here to keep the sample that is currently on the stage there and remove the rest of the samples, or that I will also want to retrieve the sample that is on the stage into the cassette and remove all of them. Then there's the status. At this moment it's ready, it's online. And you can also see here the vacuum volumes of the microscope in color. So the gun is the accelerator, and you have the column, and then you have the detection area. Those corresponds to these values, but this is depicting in clear color. When you see something suddenly change, you'll pick up on the color more quickly than you'll pick up on the values that are depicted here. And you also see the column valves in here, which are the two triangles. The column valves are now open, so you see the triangles are apart. When they're closed, they're together. Then you have here a button where you can initialize the autoloader. At this moment it is initialized, but after an error has been recovered, you have to reinitialize the autoloader. You can do that here on the on-system display, but you can also do that on the control panel of the microscope by clicking on it with the mouse in the autoloader control panel. When you can push it, it actually turns green. So in this case it's grayed out. You cannot activate it. A reason for it is, of course, the autoloader now is already initialized. And then you have here the button that says dock. So it's now grayed out because we have no capsule mounted on the autoloader. So if I would mount a capsule on the autoloader, we'll see that this button turns green and dock changed into undock. And the reason for that is that the cassette is already in the docker. So the only option when there is a capsule mounted on the autoloader that you have is, of course, to remove the cassette that is already there. Now when the autoloader is empty and you place a capsule, this button turns green and it will say dock, similar as it does now, but it will turn green with the word dock. You can then also go to the settings and change the number of settings. Normally we don't change them that much, so we have the display of the vacuum in log values. You can change these values to Pascal or Torr. We can change the temperature, that is now in Kelvin or in Celsius. We can switch the LEDs on the microscope, so that's the lighting on the top and on the bottom. We can switch that on and off. And you can also lock your screen with a pin code when it's collecting data and you really don't want other people to touch it. You can protect it using a pin code. You can cancel and we come back here. And if we go back, then we have the total overview, which again shows you the pressure. It shows you the temperature. It's currently all nitrogen. When it's at room temperature, the microscope is not cold. Now it's cooled down, so it's at all nitrogen temperatures. Again, the levels of the dewars for the autoloader and the stage. And we also see the stage position. So we see the X, Y, and Z coordinates and the alpha tilt of the stage. On the right side again, the vacuum in color. If we press temperature control, we see specific values from the autoloader temperature. So again, there's all nitrogen on both. The current status is all nitrogen and the requested status is all nitrogen. When you warm up the microscope, the requested status will be room temperature, and it will tell you what the current status is. So when it's warmed up, it will also say room temperature. Here are the temperatures values in Kelvin of each of the components in the microscope. So the cartridge is your cartridge gripper. The docker holds the cassette. The cassette is the cassette gripper. So that is the gripper that moves the cassette up and down, but the cassette is always parked in the docker. Then we have the autoloader and the column dewar. So those are the two dewars that hold the liquid nitrogen for both the autoloader cooling and the column. And finally we have the holder, which is the stage. We can go back. And when we press autoloader, we get the control of the autoloaders that we just explained. So this is the whole on-system display.